The rain didn't just fall that night in Chicago. It attacked. It hammered against the glass and steel of the city like it had a personal grudge, turning the streets into black mirrors that reflected every neon sign in distorted, accusing streaks. Inside the idling Maybach, Elias Voss felt the storm inside his skull matching the one outside, beat for beat. His left knee wouldn't stop bouncing. It hadn't stopped for 43 minutes straight. The clinical trial data for the new neuromodulation implant, his company's flagship project that was supposed to revolutionize ADHD treatment, had just cratered in the latest review. Numbers swimming in red. Board members already sharpening their knives. Investors from Singapore sending polite but ice-cold emails. And the worst part, the little white pill he'd taken earlier to smooth the edges had only sharpened everything else. Every thought, every regret, every worst-case scenario screaming at once in high definition. Elias Voss was 34 years old, worth $2.7 billion on paper, and right now he felt like a live wire with no ground. He couldn't sit still another second. The driver hadn't even shifted into park when Elias shoved the rear door open and stepped straight into the deluge. Cold water soaked through his tailored charcoal suit in seconds, plastering the fabric to his skin, but he barely noticed. He needed movement, noise, something, anything, to cut through the hurricane in his head. The emergency entrance of Mercy General Hospital glowed ahead like a beacon for the broken. He stormed through the automatic doors, leaving a trail of rainwater on the linoleum. The waiting area smelled of antiseptic, wet wool, and quiet desperation. An elderly couple huddled together. A teenager shivered under a thin blanket. And there, moving with calm efficiency between beds, was Nurse Serafina Akoy. Sira, 29, 7 months pregnant. Braids pulled back into a practical bun with a few stubborn curls escaping to frame her face. Her navy scrub stretched gently over the round swell of her belly, and one hand rested there instinctively as she adjusted an IV drip for a young girl with a broken wrist. Her deep brown skin glowed under the harsh fluorescent lights, but there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many double shifts and too little sleep. She carried herself with the kind of quiet strength that came from someone who had already survived more than most people ever would. Elias didn't see her at first. His vision tunneled on the first white coat he spotted. "I need the head of neurology right now." His voice cracked through the ward like thunder. "My implant trial just collapsed, and I don't have time for your bureaucratic bullshit." Heads turned. A security guard started forward. Sira was closer. She stepped into his path with the steady grace of someone used to handling storms. Her voice was calm, warm, threaded with the soft lilt of a Nigerian accent that had been softened by years in Chicago. "Sir, this is the emergency department. If you're not injured or accompanying a patient, I need you to step back and let us do our jobs." Their eyes met. For one brief, electric second, Elias' racing mind snagged on her, on the protective curve of her hand over her belly, on the unflinching steadiness in her gaze, on the way she spoke to him like he was a human being and not a walking bank account. Something in him recognized something in her. Two people who had spent lifetimes trying to quiet minds that refused to be quiet. Then the pill, the rage, the fear, and the overload collided. His hand moved before thought could stop it. The slap landed hard, open palm against her cheek with a sharp, sickening crack that seemed to echo off every wall. Sira's head snapped sideways. Her free hand flew up instinctively, the other shielding her unborn child. For a heartbeat, the entire emergency bay went dead silent except for the rain drumming against the windows. Elias blinked. The static in his head went terrifyingly quiet. He stared at the red bloom already rising on her skin, at the way her lips parted in shock but no scream escaped, at the profound, quiet disappointment in her eyes, like she had hoped the world would be kinder tonight, and he had personally proven it was. Security was shouting now. Hands were grabbing at him. But Elias Voss did the only thing his fractured nervous system knew how to do in that moment. He turned, and he walked away. Back into the rain, back into the Maybach. The door slammed shut behind him with finality. The car pulled away before anyone could stop it, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Sierra stood perfectly still for 3 long heartbeats, one hand on her stinging cheek, the other cradling the life inside her. The baby kicked hard as if protesting. She whispered, voice barely audible over the chaos now erupting around her, "We're okay, little one. Mama's got you." But nothing felt okay. If you've ever been hurt by someone in a moment of their weakness and watched them walk away like it meant nothing, how did that moment sit in your body afterward? Tell me in the comments. Your stories matter here. She finished her shift because that's what Sierra Akoy did. She showed up for people even when the world had just slapped her in the face. The assault report was filed. The police statement given in a quiet side room while her supervisor pressed ice to her cheek. By the time she clocked out at 2:17 a.m., the rain had turned to sleet, and her older brother's black SUV was already waiting at the curb like a sentinel. Dr. Kai Akoy stepped out into the cold night. 32 years old, built like someone who had once carried rucksacks through war zones, with the same deep brown skin as his sister, but eyes that had seen too much to ever fully soften. He had left the Army Rangers years ago for private intelligence work, the kind of work that didn't appear on official resumes and involved favors that could topple governments if called in. One look at the darkening bruise on Sierra's face, and Kai's expression didn't change, but the air around him did. "Who?" he asked, voice low and dangerously gentle. Sierra shook her head as she climbed into the passenger seat, wincing slightly. "Elias Voss, the billionaire. It happened so fast, Kai. I don't think he even meant to do it, but the baby kicked right after and I just—" Kai closed the door behind her with controlled care. He didn't speak again until they were halfway to her apartment in Bronzeville. Then, quietly, "He put his hands on you while you were carrying my blood. That's all the meaning I need." Sierra reached over and squeezed his forearm. "Promise me you won't do anything reckless. We handle this the right way, through channels." Kai gave her a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Channels are already opening, little sister. You just rest. Let me carry this part." The next morning, Elias woke in his 58th floor penthouse with a headache that felt like divine payback. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed a gray Chicago dawn, the lake churning angrily below. His phone was exploding. Legal PR, the hospital's chief of staff demanding an immediate meeting. And then the video. Someone in the waiting room had recorded everything. Grainy but unmistakable. It was already everywhere. Billionaire with ADHD slaps pregnant black nurse and walks away. 2 million views overnight. Comments pouring in like acid. Elias watched the clip on loop, stomach knotting tighter with each replay. The way she hadn't screamed, hadn't cursed, just that look of profound disappointment. It cut deeper than any boardroom failure ever had. His assistant, Marcus, entered without knocking, face pale. "Sir, the board is convening an emergency session. Singapore investors are threatening to pull funding, and there's something else." Elias rubbed his temples. "What now?" "Her brother, Dr. Kai Akoy. He's not just any doctor. He ran elite operations in places that don't officially exist. He has connections, quiet, lethal ones. People who owe him favors that can't be bought with money." Elias laughed once, sharp and bitter. "So he'll sue me dry. Fine, I'll settle. 20 million, 30, make it go away." Marcus shifted. "It's not about money with him, sir. From what I'm hearing, he wants something more personal." 3 days later, an unmarked envelope arrived at Elias' private office by courier. No return address, just his name in neat, block handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. Sierra sitting on a bench by Lake Michigan the day before, hand resting on her belly, smiling softly at something off camera. On the back, a handwritten note. "You walked away like it was nothing." She didn't have that luxury. "See you soon. K." Elia's hands shook as he stared at it. Not ordinary fear. This was the rare, crystalline kind that cut through even his ADHD chaos. He had hurt someone who was loved by people, capable of hurting him back in ways his billions couldn't shield. He canceled every meeting that day and drove himself, alone, to the address his discreet investigators had found for Kai Akoi, a modest but impeccably kept brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. No obvious security, just a single wind chime singing softly in the breeze, sounding strangely like a warning. Kai answered the door before the first knock finished echoing. He filled the frame, tall, broad, eyes like polished stone. "You've got nerve showing up here uninvited," Kai said, voice even. Elias met his gaze, knee wanting desperately to bounce but forcing stillness. "I came to apologize, in person, to her, to you, whatever it takes to make this right." Kai studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment, then stepped aside without a word. Inside, the house smelled of ginger tea and fresh bread. Sierra sat on the living room couch with her feet propped up, a paperback novel open in her lap. The bruise on her cheek had deepened to a vivid purple, but her eyes were steady and clear when they lifted to meet his. Elias felt something crack wide open inside his chest. "I don't expect forgiveness," he began, voice rough with exhaustion. "What I did was unforgivable. The ADHD, the pressure, the pill I took, none of it excuses hitting you. I'm here to do whatever you need. Money, public apology, time, whatever helps you and the baby." Sierra closed the book slowly and set it aside. She studied him with the same calm that had stopped him in his tracks that night in the hospital. "Money won't erase the sting on my face or the fear I felt when my child kicked right after your hand did," she said quietly. "But sitting here acting like you're the only one in this room fighting a mind that won't stay quiet, that helps no one." She gestured for him to sit. He did, perched on the edge of the armchair like it might reject him. "I have ADHD too," Sierra continued. "Diagnosed young. Mine looks different. I had to mask it hard, immigrant family, single mom after my father left, scholarship rides through nursing school. The world doesn't make space for black girls who can't sit still or stay focused the right way. So I learned to armor up. You seem to have armored up with money and constant motion instead." Elias swallowed hard. No therapist, no ex, no business partner had ever spoken to him with that kind of unflinching honesty. Kai leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, listening without interrupting. For the next hour and a half, Sierra talked about growing up between Lagos and Chicago, about losing her mother to aggressive cancer 2 years earlier, about the man who had fathered her child and disappeared the moment the test turned positive, about how nursing let her scattered mind focus on saving others instead of drowning in her own noise. Elias listened, really listened. His racing thoughts slowed to the rhythm of her voice. For once, the whirlwind stayed mostly still. When she finished, he said the truest thing he could manage. "I want to understand what I broke, not just write a check and disappear. Understand it." Kai's eyebrows lifted slightly, the first crack in his armor. Sierra watched Elias for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then prove it. Come to the free clinic tomorrow morning. Not as Elias Voss the billionaire. As a volunteer. Scrub floors, stock shelves, whatever they assign you. And every time the spiral starts screaming in your head, you stop, breathe, and remember the sound your hand made against my face. If someone has ever forced you to confront the worst version of yourself and then offered you a chance to become something better, what did that feel like? Share in the comments if it feels right. These conversations are part of why stories like this hit so deep." The following weeks became the hardest and most transformative of Elias Voss's life. He arrived at the free clinic every morning at 6:00 a.m. sharp, wearing ill-fitting borrowed scrubs that smelled of bleach. His mind still raced like a broken engine, but now he had small tools Sierra quietly shared during stolen moments between patients. Grounding techniques using the 5 senses, discreet fidget devices disguised as medical clips, even a custom playlist of brown noise and low-frequency tones that somehow quieted the internal storm. Patience noticed the change. The awkward, intense man who kept dropping clipboards and apologizing profusely slowly became someone they looked forward to seeing, especially the children. Elia's ADHD-fueled creativity turned into ridiculous distraction games during vaccinations, silly voices, impromptu puppet shows with tongue depressors, stories invented on the spot that made scared kids laugh instead of cry. Sierra watched from a distance at first, wary, protective. Then she started watching closer. Their conversations evolved from careful politeness to something warmer, laced with surprising humor. She teased him mercilessly about his inability to fold hospital linens properly. He retaliated by bringing her favorite decaf ginger tea every single shift and learning exactly how she liked her plantain chips. Extra crispy, light sprinkle of chili powder, never too much salt. One gray afternoon in the break room, Sierra found him staring at the wall calendar as if it held the meaning of life. His hands were trembling visibly. "Spiral?" she asked softly, easing herself into the chair beside him. Her belly was fuller now, the baby active and strong beneath her scrubs. "Yeah," Elias admitted, voice raw. "I keep replaying that night. How easy it was to lose control. How much worse it could have been if the baby—" Sierra reached over and placed her hand gently over his. The touch was warm, steady, grounding. "Look at me," she said. He did. Gray eyes met deep brown, and for a moment the chaos inside him quieted to something almost peaceful. "You're not that man from that night," she told him. "Not if you keep choosing differently every day. Showing up here is the choice." The touch lingered longer than necessary. Neither of them pulled away. Something new and terrifying sparked between them, attraction born not from power or beauty, but from two people who had spent their lives masking their neurodivergent minds, finally seeing each other without pretense. If you've ever felt like your brain was both your greatest curse and your hidden superpower, and someone finally saw the superpower instead of the curse, type, "I see you" in the comments. Let's create a space where those stories can breathe. Their first real moment alone happened almost by accident. Sierra's car refused to start after a brutal 12-hour shift. Kai was out of the city on one of his mysterious consulting trips. Elias offered to drive her home. Instead of heading straight to her apartment, they ended up at a small, unassuming Ethiopian restaurant she loved. Warm lighting, injera baskets, the rich smell of Berber and slow-cooked stews. Overshared platters and spiced tea, the walls between them lowered even further. "I was scared of you at first," Sierra confessed, tearing off a piece of injera. "Not because of your money, because powerful men who lose control rarely come back to clean up the mess they made." Elias nodded, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "I've lost control my entire life, in relationships, in business, in my own head. People either enabled the chaos or walked away. You did neither. You made me look at it." She gave him a small, genuine smile. "And you're still looking. That matters more than you know." Their hands brushed when reaching for the same napkin. This time, neither pretended it was nothing. Later, walking along the Lake Michigan shore under strings of warm lights, the city skyline glittering like scattered diamonds behind them, Elias stopped. "I still don't deserve any of this," he said quietly. "Your time, your patience, whatever this feeling between us is becoming." Sierra turned to face him, the wind gently tugging at her braids. "Deserve is a word that traps people, Elias. I'm not handing you anything because you earned it on some scoreboard. I'm choosing to see who you're becoming. That's different. That's real." He kissed her then, hesitant at first, almost afraid she would disappear. She kissed him back, one hand resting lightly on his chest, the other cradling the curve of her belly where their futures, separate but now somehow linked, were growing. It wasn't fireworks or movie romance. It was quieter, deeper, two fractured minds finding rare stillness in each other. But the universe rarely lets redemption unfold without testing it. 2 months after that first kiss, the fragile peace shattered violently. Elias was in the middle of a tense board meeting when his phone vibrated with a single-word message from Kai. Run! By the time he reached Sierra's apartment building, the street was already flashing with police lights and yellow tape. Neighbors gathered in hushed clusters. Kai met him at the perimeter, face carved from stone. Someone broke in last night, Kai said flatly. Took nothing valuable, left this on her pillow. He handed Elias a printed photograph. It showed Sierra sleeping peacefully in her own bed, taken from inside the room, time-stamped 3 nights earlier. On the back, typed in plain font. You thought walking away ended it. This is only the beginning. She carries more than your guilt now. Someone who knows what you really are. Sierra herself was safe. She had been working an overnight shift at the hospital, but the violation felt like a second, colder slap. Whoever this was had intimate knowledge. Her daily routines, buried details from Elia's past business scandals, even private medical notes suggesting early complications with the pregnancy that only a handful of doctors should have accessed. Elia's mind, usually a scattered storm, suddenly sharpened into something dangerous and focused. I brought this to her door, he told Kai, voice cracking with fury and guilt. My old enemies, former partners who lost fortunes when I redirected the company, they're using her to destroy me. Kai's eyes were cold steel. Then we finish it together, but you follow my rules. No lone wolf billionaire moves. No walking away when it gets ugly. We do this my way. For the first time, Elias looked at Sierra's brother and saw not just a threat, but a necessary ally, someone forged in the same fire of protecting the people they loved. The investigation that followed pulled them both into shadows Elias had never imagined touching with his billions. Kai activated a network of ghosts, former special forces operators, off-grid hackers, even a few unlikely allies planted years ago inside Voss Neural Dynamics itself. Layer by layer, they peeled back the conspiracy. The architect was Dr. Lucien Hale, Elia's former chief technology officer, a brilliant but deeply resentful man who had been systematically sabotaging the company from the inside after being passed over for leadership. Hale had funded anonymous smear campaigns, leaked proprietary data, and hired private investigators to dig up dirt. But the pregnancy complication details and the bedroom photos, those had come from inside Mercy General, a nurse drowning in gambling debts, pressured into accessing records. The surveillance, a high-end private investigator on Hale's payroll, the same one who had helped dig up dirt on Sierra's ex-partner to keep him silent. The final confrontation happened at midnight in a derelict warehouse on Chicago's South Side, rain once again hammering the metal roof like judgment. Hale stood waiting, smirking, flanked by 2 hired enforcers. You were always too impulsive, Voss, he sneered. One slap caught on camera and the internet did half my work for me. I just gave the monster a little push. Elias stepped forward, the familiar static roaring in his head. But this time he breathed through it, anchoring on Sierra's voice from weeks earlier. Remember the sound. Choose differently. I used to believe my brain was the enemy, Elias said, voice steady despite the chaos. Turns out the real enemies were people like you, people who exploit weakness instead of building strength. You wanted the company, the patents, the recognition, but you forgot one thing. He took another step. I'm not walking away anymore. What happened next was swift, coordinated, and merciless in its precision. Kai's team moved like smoke, disarming, neutralizing, binding. No unnecessary violence, just years of training and cold justice. Hale was taken into custody on multiple federal charges. The compromised nurse turned state's witness for immunity. The damaging videos were countered by a raw, unscripted apology video Elias had recorded weeks earlier, showing his face, his struggle, his genuine effort to change. It spread differently this time. People saw a man fighting his demons instead of hiding behind wealth. If you're carrying the weight of a mistake you can't undo, know that real redemption isn't loud or perfect. It's showing up day after day even when no one is watching. What's one small step you're willing to take this week toward becoming who you want to be? Comment it below. I read every single one. In the months that followed, Sira gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl they named Amara, meaning grace in her father's Igbo heritage. Elias was right there in the delivery room, holding Sira's hand through every contraction, his own mind calmer and more present than it had ever been in his life. Kai stood just outside the door like a guardian, allowing himself the smallest, proudest smile when the baby's first cry filled the air. On a crisp autumn evening 6 months later, Elias and Sira walked the familiar Lake Michigan path where their first real kiss had happened. Amara slept peacefully in a carrier against Sira's chest, tiny fist curled near her mother's heart. Kai trailed a respectful distance behind, ever watchful but no longer hostile. Elias stopped beneath the same string of warm lights. "I still wake up some mornings thinking I don't deserve any of this," he whispered. Sira turned to him, her eyes soft but strong. "Then keep earning it, Elias, every single day. That's what love looks like for people like us. Minds that race, hearts that feel everything, roads that are harder. We choose each other anyway." He kissed her then, slow, deep, full of the kind of promise that survives storms. She kissed him back with the same quiet ferocity, one hand on his chest, the other resting over their daughter. But as they turned to head home, laughing softly at something Amara did in her sleep, a final shadow flickered at the edge of the path. Another envelope, tucked neatly against the base of a lamppost. Kai reached it first. He opened it, read the single typed line inside, and his face hardened into something ancient and dangerous. Elias met his eyes over Sira's head, the baby cooing contentedly between them. The note read, "You fixed one monster tonight, but the real one was never Hale. Watch your back, Vaz. Some debts don't die with handcuffs." The fight wasn't over. Yet for the first time in his chaotic, brilliant, pain-filled life, Elias Vaz wasn't walking away from the storm. He was walking into it, hand in hand with the woman who had taught him how to stand still, with a daughter who carried grace in her name, and with a brother-in-arms who had shown him what real power looked like. Whatever came next, whatever unseen force still lurked in the shadows waiting to strike, they would face it together. Not perfectly, not without fear, but together. And that, for now, was enough to keep the rain from feeling like an accusation anymore. The note in Kai's hand felt heavier than it should have. The paper was ordinary, cheap printer stock, but the words burned like acid. Elias read them again over Sira's shoulder, his arm instinctively tightening around her as Amara stirred in the carrier. The baby made a small, contented sound, completely unaware of the shadow that had just fallen across their fragile peace. Sira's breath caught. She looked up at her brother, then at Elias, her deep brown eyes searching both their faces. "What does it mean? Hale is in custody. The nurse confessed. The videos are handled. Who else could still be coming for us?" Kai folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. "It means the slap wasn't the spark. It was the distraction. Someone used Elias' meltdown as cover to get closer, to you, to the baby, to the company. Hale was a useful idiot, but he wasn't the architect. He didn't have access to your medical records or the surveillance inside your apartment. Someone with deeper reach did." Elias felt the familiar static rising in his skull, the thousand thoughts colliding at once. But this time he didn't fight it blindly. He anchored himself on Sira's steady breathing, on the warm weight of Amara against them, on the memory of her hand over his in the break room weeks ago. Then we stop running blind. We map every connection. My old partners, the board members who lost money when I pivoted to ethical neurotech, even the investors who pushed the original aggressive trials. I'll open every ledger, every email, Every offshore account I buried. Kai nodded once, the respect in his eyes no longer reluctant. Good, but you don't do it alone. My network is already pulling threads, old contacts from Yemen, a hacker collective in Lagos that owes me for extracting one of their own, even a few ghosts inside Chicago PD who hate dirty money more than they fear losing pensions. We meet at the brownstone tomorrow night. No phones, no drivers, just us. Sierra placed her free hand on Elia's chest, feeling the rapid thud of his heart. We do this together, all three of us, and when it's over, we build something that can't be touched by whatever ghost is still out there. If you've ever felt a threat lingering just out of sight after you thought the danger had passed, what helped you keep moving forward anyway? Share one thing that grounded you in the comments. I'm reading them as we go deeper into this journey. The next 6 weeks became a war fought in shadows and spreadsheets. Elias practically lived between the brownstone and his secure server room in the penthouse. His ADHD, once a liability that made him slap a pregnant woman and flee, became a strange weapon. While others tired after hours of staring at data, Elias' brain could hold 20 threads at once, cross-referencing financial trails, spotting anomalies in meeting minutes, remembering an offhand comment from a board dinner 3 years ago that suddenly fit like a missing puzzle piece. Sierra returned to light duty at the hospital, but her real work happened at night. She pored over her own medical records with a fresh eye, noticing small discrepancies only a nurse would catch: altered timestamps on lab results, a missing consultation note from an OB she had never met. Someone had been inside the system long before the slap ever happened. Kai moved like a ghost. He disappeared for days at a time, returning with new scars or new names. One evening he brought a quiet woman named Nia Adebio, mid-30s, sharp cheekbones, eyes that missed nothing. She was a forensic accountant who had once helped expose a corruption ring in Abuja. She's family now, Kai said simply. She lost a sister to men who thought money erased consequences. The four of them worked around the scarred wooden table in the brownstone's dining room, Amara sleeping in a bassinet nearby, her soft breaths a reminder of what they were protecting. Maps covered the walls. Red string connected faces and accounts. Coffee and ginger tea flowed like fuel. Elias found the first real crack on a rainy Thursday. A shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Voss Neural Dynamics had funneled research grants through it during the aggressive early trials. But the money hadn't gone to legitimate R&D, it had disappeared into private accounts linked to a man named Dr. Raphael Morrow, French-Senegalese neuroscientist. Brilliant, ruthless, disappeared from public view 6 years ago after being quietly blacklisted for unethical human trials in Eastern Europe. Morrow had been Hale's silent partner, but more than that, he had been the one pushing the original implant design that bypassed safety protocols. The design Elias had rejected and rewritten when he took full control of the company. The one that would have turned patients into guinea pigs for profit. And now Morrow was back, in Chicago, using the slap as the perfect smokescreen to destabilize Elias, discredit the new ethical implant, and reclaim the patents through backdoor corporate maneuvers. The real twist came when Nia uncovered the deepest layer. Morrow wasn't just after money or revenge. He was after Sierra. Or more precisely, after the baby. Amara carried a unique genetic marker. During Sierra's routine prenatal testing, a rare neurodevelopmental profile had shown up, something that combined traits from both parents, ADHD lineages, in a way that made her brain potentially perfect for the next generation implant Morrow wanted to weaponize. Not for treatment, for control, for creating enhanced operatives who could focus under extreme stress without breaking. The slap hadn't been random. Elias' meltdown in the ER had been subtly provoked, timed with the pill he'd been given by a planted pharmacist weeks earlier. The footage orchestrated to go viral at the exact moment Morrow needed public outrage to pressure the board. Everything had been engineered to isolate Elias, terrify Sierra, and position Morrow to step in as the savior, offering cutting-edge care for the at-risk pregnancy. When Kai laid the evidence on the table, the room went silent except for the soft hum of the baby monitor. Sierra's hand trembled as she touched Amara's cheek. They were watching me before he even slapped me, planning to use my child as a lab rat. Elias felt the static explode into something volcanic, but instead of walking away, he stood, walked around the table, and knelt in front of Sierra. I brought this darkness to your door, but I swear on everything I'm becoming, I will burn it down before it touches either of you. Kai placed a hand on Elias' shoulder. Then we don't wait for them to come. We go tomorrow, tonight. His safe house is in the old meatpacking district. We end this on our terms. What would you do if you discovered someone had been targeting your family long before any visible conflict even started? Would you run, fight, or something else? Drop your raw thoughts below. This part of the story is where everything changes. The raid on the meatpacking district's safe house was nothing like the movies. No dramatic explosions, no heroic one-liners. It was cold, methodical, and terrifying in its quiet efficiency. Kai's team's 6 ghosts who moved like extensions of his will breached the perimeter at 3:17 a.m. Elias was with them, not as the billionaire but as the man who refused to hide anymore. He wore plain black tactical gear, a fidget ring spinning constantly on his finger to keep the chaos at bay. Sierra had stayed behind with Nia and Amara, but her voice played on loop in Elias' earpiece. Come back to us, all of you. They found Morrow in a converted cold storage room turned makeshift lab. Monitors glowed with stolen VAS neural data. On the central screen, live feeds from hidden cameras that had once been inside Sierra's apartment, the hospital, even the brownstone. Morrow turned slowly when the lights flicked on. Tall, elegant, with silver threading through his dark hair and a smile that never reached his calculating eyes. Mr. Voss, Dr. Akoy, I wondered how long it would take you to connect the dots. Elias stepped forward, the static screaming but his voice steady. You used my worst moment to try to steal my future. You targeted a pregnant woman and an unborn child because you couldn't handle being told no. Morrow laughed softly. The world runs on control, Elias. Your implant could have given us gods among men. Instead, you watered it down with ethics and compassion. Weakness. I simply took what was inevitable. Kai moved like liquid shadow. In seconds, Morrow's 2 remaining guards were disarmed and zip-tied. No shots fired, just the quiet click of restraints and the low hum of servers. But the real revelation came when Elias accessed the central terminal. There, buried in encrypted folders, was the final layer. Morrow hadn't been working alone. One of Elias' own board members, Victoria Lang, the icy CFO who had pushed hardest against the ethical pivot, was Morrow's silent financier and lover. She had fed him access codes, leaked the pregnancy details, and even arranged the planted pharmacist who gave Elias the destabilizing pill that night in the rain. And worse, Victoria was already in motion. While they were here, she was at VAS Neural headquarters preparing a hostile takeover vote for Dawn, using the ongoing scandal as leverage. If she succeeded, she would hand the company and the patents on Amara's genetic profile straight to Morrow's backers. Elias' mind raced through 1,000 scenarios at once. Then it crystallized on one. We split up, he said. Kai, you finish here. Get Morrow and every drive into federal hands with the evidence. I'm going to the tower. I'm stopping Victoria before the vote. Kai met his eyes. You sure you can do this without spiraling? Elias thought of Sierra's hand on his cheek the night she forgave him, of Amara's first smile, of the man he was choosing to become every single day. I'm sure. The drive to VAS Neural Dynamics headquarters was a blur of rain-slicked streets and racing thoughts. Elias burst into the executive boardroom at 5:42 a.m., soaked again, just like the night this all began. The board was already assembled. Victoria Lang stood at the head of the table, sleek in a tailored navy suit, projecting calm authority as she prepared to call the vote that would end him. Every head turned when Elias entered. He didn't shout, he didn't pace. He simply walked to the front, placed his phone on the table, and hit play on the raw footage Nia had prepared. Morrow's confession, the financial trails, the camera feeds showing Victoria's meetings with him. The room went deathly silent. Victoria's face drained of color. This is fabricated, desperate lies from a man who can't control himself. Elias looked at her, really looked. I used to be that man. The one who slapped a pregnant nurse and walked away because his brain was on fire and he didn't know how to put it out. But I chose to come back, to stay, to fight differently. You chose to sell out a child for power. That's the real disorder here. One by one, board members turned against her. Votes shifted. The takeover collapsed before it even began. Security escorted Victoria out in handcuffs as federal agents, tipped off by Kai, arrived to take her into custody. Elias stood at the window overlooking the waking city, rain still falling, but this time it felt like cleansing instead of accusation. If you've ever had to stand in a room full of powerful people and choose truth over comfort, even when your mind was screaming at you, what gave you the strength? Comment your moment. I carry those stories with me. Dawn broke as Elias drove back to the brownstone. Sierra met him at the door, Amara in her arms. The baby reached for him with tiny fists and Elias took her gently, pressing a kiss to her soft curls. Sierra pulled him inside, her hands framing his face, thumbs brushing away the exhaustion lines. You did it, she whispered. You stayed. We did it, he corrected, all of us. Kai entered from the kitchen, looking more tired than Elias had ever seen him, but whole. Morrow is finished. Evidence is with the right people. No more shadows. Nia raised a mug of ginger tea in quiet toast, to choosing better every damn day. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, four fractured people who had become something stronger. Laughter came easier now. Stories were shared without armor. Amara cooed and gurgled, the center of a new gravity. Later that afternoon, Elias and Sierra took Amara for a walk along the lakefront again. The same path, the same string lights, now glowing softly in the late daylight. This time, no envelope waited. Only the future. Elias stopped under the lights and dropped to one knee, not with a ring, but with a small, hand-carved wooden box he had made himself during the long nights of research. Inside, a simple silver pendant etched with three intertwined symbols, a brain wave pattern, a protective shield, and a blooming flower. Sierra Akoy, he said, voice thick with everything he had become, I don't deserve you yet, but I will spend every day earning the right to stand beside you and our daughter. Marry me. Not because I'm rich or redeemed, but because we choose each other, storms, static, grace, and all. Tears glistened in Sierra's eyes as she pulled him up and into a kiss that tasted of rain, forgiveness, and new beginnings. Yes, Elias Voss, 1,000 times yes. Amara clapped her tiny hands between them, as if sealing the promise. But as they turned toward home, hand in hand, with Kai and Nia waiting ahead like family, a final shadow flickered at the very edge of the path. Not an envelope this time. Just a single black rose left on a bench, with a tiny note tucked beneath. The debts of the fathers pass to the children. Watch the ones closest to you. Some monsters wear familiar faces. An old friend. Kai saw it first. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Elias met Sierra's eyes. The static rose once more, but softer now, manageable. A reminder, not a master. Whatever came next, whatever unseen hand still pulled strings from deeper shadows, they would face it the way they had learned to face everything. Together, not perfectly, not without fear, but unbroken. And in that quiet, rain-kissed moment, with their daughter's laughter ringing like hope, The storm finally felt like it was breaking into something beautiful. The black rose lay on the bench like a warning carved from midnight itself. Its petals glistened with leftover rain, and the small note beneath it carried the faint scent of expensive cologne, something sharp and metallic that twisted Elia's stomach. He picked it up slowly, the paper cool between his fingers, while Sierra held Amara a little tighter against her chest. The baby's soft coos had gone quiet, as if even she sensed the shift in the air. Kai stepped forward, his broad shoulders blocking the wind. He read the note once, twice, then crushed it in his fist without a word. But his eyes, those obsidian eyes that had seen wars most people only read about, betrayed a flicker of something deeper than anger. Recognition. "An old friend," he muttered, voice low enough that only Elia's and Sierra could hear. "Not Morrow's people, not Victoria's. This handwriting, the phrasing. It's from someone I buried a long time ago." Nia appeared at the edge of the path, her sharp features drawn tight. She had followed at a distance, ever the quiet guardian. "We need to move. Now. The brownstone isn't safe anymore." They didn't run. Running would have fed the fear. Instead, they walked with purpose, Elia's arm around Sierra, Kai scanning every shadow, Nia already on an encrypted burner phone coordinating with her Lagos contacts. Amara fell asleep against her mother's heartbeat, tiny fingers curled into the fabric of Sierra's coat like an anchor. Back at the brownstone, the four of them gathered in the living room under the warm glow of a single lamp. The red strings still crisscrossed the walls like veins, but now they looked different, unfinished. Elias spread the new note on the coffee table beside the wooden pendant he had given Sierra earlier that day. The engagement promise felt both precious and fragile in the new silence. "Who is it, Kai?" Sierra asked, her voice steady even as her free hand rested protectively over Amara. "You said buried, not dead." Kai exhaled slowly, rubbing the scar that ran along his jaw, a souvenir from a night in Yemen that had never made it into any official report. "His name is Idris Kane. We served together in the Rangers before I went private. He was my spotter, my brother in every way that mattered, until he was. During a botched extraction in Damascus, he crossed a line, sold intel to the highest bidder, got 3 of our team killed. I confronted him. We fought. I left him for dead in the desert with a bullet in his shoulder and sand in his lungs." Elias felt the static surge again, that familiar whirlwind threatening to scatter his thoughts, but he breathed through it, grounding himself on the feel of Sierra's hand now laced with his. "He survived." "He did more than survive," Kai continued. "He rebuilt himself in the shadows, became a ghost broker selling secrets, engineering falls from grace, profiting off other people's chaos. The slap, that was never just about you losing control, Elias. Kane saw the video the second it dropped. He recognized an opportunity. He fed Morrow the access codes, fed Victoria the financial pressure, even planted the idea of targeting Amara's genetics because he knew it would pull me back into the game. He wants revenge on me by destroying everything I love, and he wants to use you too as the weapon." Sierra's eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. "So all of this, the hospital, the pregnancy complications, the break-in, it was never random. It was personal, from before Elias even walked through those doors." Nia leaned forward, her fingers flying across a laptop. "I'm pulling everything now. Kane has been operating under at least 7 aliases. Last known location, a private airstrip outside Gary, Indiana, but he's slippery. He always stays one move ahead." Elias stood, packing once before forcing himself still. His mind raced through possibilities, corporate shells, old military contacts, even the pharmacist who had given him the pill that night. Then one thread snapped into focus. The pharmacist. She wasn't just planted by Morrow. Kane must have recruited her directly. She mentioned a silent partner in her confession, but the feds never dug deeper because Hale took the fall so cleanly. What if Kane was the one who timed my meltdown? What if he's been watching me for years, waiting for the perfect fracture point? The revelation landed like a second storm. Kane hadn't just exploited Elia's ADHD, he had studied it. Researched high-functioning cases, learned the exact triggers that could push someone from manageable chaos into public catastrophe. The pill had been custom formulated, the video angle calculated, all to create the perfect viral moment that would isolate Elias, terrify Sierra, and drag Kai out of the shadows. But Kane had made one mistake. He had underestimated what two neurodivergent minds fighting for their family could become when they stopped masking and started aligning. If you've ever discovered that a betrayal ran much deeper than you imagined, maybe from someone you once trusted with your life, what was the moment you decided not to let it define you? Tell me in the comments. Your courage fuels stories like this one. They moved at midnight. Not with an army, but with precision born of love and necessity. Kai's remaining ghosts secured the perimeter. Nia fed real-time intel from a mobile command van parked 3 blocks away. Elias and Sierra insisted on coming together. Amara stayed behind with a trusted neighbor who had become like an ant, protected by layers of quiet security. The private airstrip outside Gary was a graveyard of rusted hangars and flickering floodlights. Wind whipped across the tarmac, carrying the sharp smell of jet fuel and wet concrete. They approached on foot, shadows among shadows. Kane waited inside the largest hangar, illuminated by a single overhead bulb. He was taller than Kai remembered, leaner, with a prosthetic arm that gleamed coldly under the light. His face carried the desert's scars, sun-etched lines and a jagged mark where the bullet had exited. But his smile was the same one from their Ranger days, charming, dangerous, utterly convinced of his own superiority. "You finally came home, brother," Kane called out, voice echoing off the metal walls. "Brought the billionaire and the nurse with you. How touching. Did you tell them how you left me to rot?" Kai stepped into the light first, Elias and Sierra a half-step behind. "I told them the truth. You sold us out. You killed our team. I gave you a chance to die with honor. You chose this instead." Kane laughed, the sound raw and jagged. "Honor, in this world? I built an empire on moments like the one your precious Elias created that night in the rain. One slap, one viral video, and suddenly the great Voss empire cracks open like an egg. I just helped it along. Mauro, Victoria, the pharmacist, they were all pawns. Easy to move when you know which strings pull hardest." Elias felt the static roar louder than ever. Memories flashed. The rain, the slap, Sierra's disappointed eyes, the fear in her voice when she protected her belly. But he didn't spiral. He channeled it, every racing thought into one focused beam. "You studied me," Elias said, stepping forward. "My ADHD, my triggers. You engineered the perfect storm because you knew I'd break and walk away. But here's what you missed, Kane. Walking away was the old me. The new me stays, fights, loves. And right now, my mind is doing what it does best, seeing every angle at once." He pulled out a small drive from his pocket, the one Nia had prepared. "This contains everything. Your aliases, your financial trails, the custom pill formula, even recordings from the hangar cameras you thought were disabled. The feds are already inbound. You're done." Kane's smile faltered for the first time. His prosthetic arm whirred softly as he reached for a hidden sidearm. "You think this ends with handcuffs? I have contingencies, people who owe me. Your pretty nurse and that miracle baby, she'll never be safe. Not while I'm breathing." Kai moved faster than thought. In one fluid motion, he disarmed Kane, pinning him to the cold concrete floor. The prosthetic arm sparked once, then went still. "You're not breathing much longer if you keep threatening my family." Sierra stepped closer, her voice calm but carrying the weight of every exhausted night shift, every fear for her child. "You wanted to use my daughter like a tool. You wanted to break Elias so completely he'd never recover. But we're still here, still choosing each other. That's the power you'll never understand." Elias knelt beside Kane, meeting the man's eyes without flinching. "I used to hate the way my brain worked. It made me hurt the one person who showed me kindness when I least deserved it. But because of Sierra, because of Amara, I learned to harness it, to stay when every instinct screamed to run. You wanted chaos. We built something stronger from it. Sirens wailed in the distance, federal agents guided by Nia's precise coordinates. Kane struggled once more, then went limp as the fight drained from him. Not defeat exactly, but the cold realization that his carefully constructed web had finally ensnared its maker. As agents swarmed the hangar, reading rights and securing evidence, Kai pulled Elias and Sierra aside. "It's over, really over this time. Kane's network is collapsing as we speak. No more shadows." If you've ever faced someone who tried to weaponize your deepest vulnerabilities against you and came out the other side stronger because of the people who stood with you, what did that victory feel like in your bones? Share below if you're ready. This story is for all of us who chose to stay and fight. The weeks that followed unfolded like the first warm days after a long winter. Charges against Kane were ironclad: conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, corporate espionage, and a dozen more that would keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. Victoria Lang and Dr. Raphael Morrow took pleas that stripped them of everything. The Voss Neural Dynamics Board voted unanimously to double down on the ethical implant program, with Elias leading a new initiative focused on accessible neurodivergent care for communities that had been overlooked for too long. Sierra returned to the hospital on her own terms, part-time, with full support for her ADHD management and maternity leave that actually meant rest. She and Elias married in a small, intimate ceremony at the lakeside, under the same string lights that had witnessed their first kiss. Kai gave her away, his usual stoic mask cracking into genuine tears when he placed her hand in Elias'. Nia stood as maid of honor, Amara gurgling happily in a tiny white dress as flower girl, and ring bearer all in one. Elias' vows were raw and unscripted, his voice steady despite the thoughts racing beautifully in the background. "I once slapped the woman I love and walked away because my mind was a storm I couldn't navigate. Today, I stand here promising to be the anchor instead of the chaos. Sierra, you taught me that grace isn't earned, it's chosen. Every day I choose you. I choose us, storms and all." Sierra's response came through happy tears, her Nigerian lilt wrapping around every word like a warm embrace. "Elias, you walked into my life like a hurricane, but you stayed to help rebuild. You saw my scattered mind not as weakness but as strength. Our daughter carries both our fires, and I can't wait to watch her burn brightly because we refuse to let anyone dim it. I choose you back, always." They kissed as the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Amara clapped from Kai's arms, her laughter the purest sound any of them had ever heard. In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm, imperfect, beautiful, alive. Elias' company thrived with Sierra on the advisory board for patient advocacy. Kai and Nia started a quiet foundation, helping veterans and immigrants navigate systems that weren't built for minds like theirs. Family dinners at the brownstone became weekly rituals filled with stories, teasing, and the occasional ADHD-fueled tangent that ended in shared laughter. One crisp evening, almost a year after that rainy night in the emergency bay, the family walked the lakeside path again. Amara, now toddling on chubby legs, chased fallen leaves while holding tightly to her father's hand. Sierra leaned into Elias, her head on his shoulder, the silver pendant he had carved resting warm against her skin. "It still feels like a dream sometimes," she murmured. "All of it, the slap, the fear, the way we turned it into this." Elias stopped, pulling her close as Kai and Nia walked ahead with Amara. "It wasn't a dream. It was a reckoning. I hurt you in the worst way, and instead of walking away forever, you gave me the chance to become someone better. I'll never take that for granted." They kissed softly, the kind of kiss that carried history and hope in equal measure. But as they turned to catch up with the others, a final, subtle shadow flickered at the edge of their vision. Not a rose this time, not a note. Just a single figure standing far down the path, a tall silhouette against the fading light, watching them with unreadable stillness. Too distant to identify, but close enough to feel intentional. The man raised one hand in what might have been a wave or a warning before melting back into the twilight. Kai noticed it too. He didn't tense or reach for a weapon. Instead, he simply nodded once, as if acknowledging an old score not yet fully settled. Elias met Sira's eyes. The static rose gently in his mind, manageable, familiar, no longer an enemy. Whoever that is will face it when it comes, together. Sira smiled, squeezing his hand as Amara ran back to them, leaves clutched in her small fists like treasures. Together, always. The family continued walking into the gathering dusk, laughter trailing behind them like light. The storm that had begun with a slap in the rain had ended, not in perfect silence, but in the quiet strength of chosen family, redeemed hearts and minds that refused to break. Yet in the distance, the silhouette lingered in memory, a final thread of intrigue whispering that some debts truly refused to die quietly. For now, though, there was only this: love hard-won, grace freely given, and the promise of tomorrow wrapped in the arms of the people who had taught a broken billionaire how to stay. And in that staying, they had all found something far more powerful than any empire or implant could ever offer: each other. If this emotional journey of redemption, unexpected love, and unbreakable family bonds resonated with you, drop a comment with what hit you hardest: the slap and the choice to stay, the way ADHD became strength, or that final lingering shadow that keeps you wondering. I read every single one. What would you have done if you were in Elia's shoes that rainy night? Or Sira's? Or Kai? Tell me your thoughts below. We're building a community around stories that refuse to walk away. If you want more unpredictable emotional deep dives like this one, raw, twist-filled, and always ending in hard-won hope, hit like, share with someone who needs to hear about choosing better, and subscribe. The next story is already forming, and it might just start with a single unexpected choice in the dark. Until then, remember, the storms don't define us. How we choose to stand in them does. Thank you for walking this path with me. See you in the comments.